ZombiCast, duration of Dawn of the Dead, contains language and scenes of violence that may be considered shocking. No listener under 17 will be admitted.
We see the face of a young woman. She is asleep. It is very quiet at first. As credits appear, the woman's face begins to twitch, as though she is having a bad dream. She moans slightly, and her expression grows more desperate. A mix of subtle sounds begin to fade in. As they get louder, we can discern what sounds like a busy office area. It is actually a frantic television studio, with the hum of panic and a national emergency. The woman's moans get louder and more desperate as the background sounds reach full volume and the credits stop. The woman sits up, snapping awake. She lurches forwards into the arms of a strong young man. She is Francine, 23 years old and very attractive, although she is gritty with dirt. Her hair is hanging, disheveled and sweaty. Her jeans and blouse have been worn for several days. She is sitting on the floor, where she has slept the last several hours, covered by an old overcoat. Tony, the copy boy.
You alright?
Fran stares at the young man. She is shaking. She doesn't speak. Tony.
Shit's really hitting the fan.
The girl tries to clear her head as the young man moves on to where others sleep on the floor. He wakes them one at a time. We begin to hear voices over the busy hum of the studio. They have an electronic tinniness as broadcast over a monitor. Fran looks about. She is still shaken from her dream. We see the television studio. Reporters buzz about madly. Everybody looks disheveled and exhausted. Technicians man monitors, and we see people on the little screens, arguing emotionally. The room is pandemonium. People run in with wire copy. Others organize the stacks of bulletins as they arrive. Others trip over cables and generally get in each other's way. Francine stares at the madness, still trying to clear her head. Man's voice.
I'm still dreaming.
Fran turns her head. Another young man sits next to her on the floor. He is one of the ones Tony awakened. Fran.
Are you not?
Woman.
I turned for the code.
Fran looks up. A young woman is offering her coffee in a paper cup. She is next in line for the overcoat and a few hours' sleep. Fran takes the cup and struggles to her feet. Woman.
The guys in the crew are going crazy. A couple of them have flown the coop already. I don't know how long we're going to stay in the air.
Fran staggers over to the control consoles. The technicians are at the end of their ropes. Excerpted from the 1977 working draft of the motion picture Dawn of the Dead by George A. Romero. The film version was largely faithful to this portion of the screenplay. The first image is a close-up of violent red carpeting, which as the camera pulls back is revealed to line the walls of a very small room packed with studio equipment. A blonde woman is resting her head against it. The actress playing assistant station manager Francine Parker, Galen Ross, is far too clean and coiffed to match the description, but is mostly a good fit. The actress is 4 years older than the character is scripted, with an emotional maturity to more than match her given years. To anyone who loves the picture, she's the only person who could have played the part. Upon my first viewing, I wasn't sure what it was I was looking at. I have always been fascinated with use of color in this opening, and while I could never get away with carpeting a wall, my office is painted a rather dark shade of crimson in homage.
Hi, this is Perry Martin. I'm the DVD producer for Anchor Bay. Sit back and buckle your seatbelt. We're about to watch Dawn of the Dead.
This is George Romero, sitting here with
Chris Romero. Hi.
And
Tom Savini. And now, George, I want to ask you, this red carpet here now, is this the foreboding of how bloody you thought this movie was going to be?
No,
or is
no, that red carpet was there. Or was that, wasn't this at QEX, or was that some actual TV station?
You shot this at a local Pittsburgh station?
Yeah, I think it was the sister station to QED, or maybe PI, I don't know.
It is never particularly quiet in the beginning. As the intro music starts 3 seconds into the picture, ominous strings are scraped less than 10 seconds later, and at the 17 mark, a percussive swell announces the movie's title, as well as the end of Fran's sleeping nightmare, as described in the screenplay's novelization by Susanna Sparrow.
After her divorce, she had traded in her glasses for contacts, her brown hair for silver blonde, and her extra 25 pounds of pasta, chocolate cake, and domesticity for a knockout figure. It was a comic dream she was having now, really. If she were awake, she would have laughed at its inherent symbolism. She was tied to the kitchen sink, her arms elbow-deep in soap suds, and her ex-husband, Charlie, was kissing her neck. And then she remembered. She was Miss Francine Parker. She was no longer Mrs. Charles Parker III, housewife at 19, bored at 21.
The music used at the beginning of the film is Cosmogony Part 1, released in 1972 as the initial track on the A side of the first album of the double LP, Dramaturgy Cosmogony, by composer Paul Lemel. Discogs list the genre as jazz funk soul, though I tend to agree with commenters there that dark orchestral may be more appropriate. It was released in the UK by Hudson Music Company. The album had previously served on the soundtrack to 1975's Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS, before being revisited by Romero. 3 additional Lemel releases arrived from 1973 to 1974, Requiem for Peace, Rockside, and in collaboration with Eric Marving, Aquasun. I could not find a biography on the composer, but his work in soundtracks dates back to the 1940s, and there were no additional releases. The olive-skinned copyboy Tony, as described in the novel, is played by the rather fair Cliff Forrest, a key grip on Dawn, who also portrayed a squire in Knight Riders, Romero's next picture. Released in 1981 and starring Ed Harris in his first lead, Knight Riders was about a motorcycle riding Renaissance fair troupe. I've never seen it myself.
Hey, that's my brother right there.
Well, that's Cliff Forrest.
Yeah.
It's Chris's brother.
It was after this movie that he decided, no, he's not going to go in the film business.
Rather than the young man in the script lying next to Fran who makes the dreaming comment, in the film it's another young woman with short, dark, curly hair. I couldn't positively identify the actress.
And that's Molly McCluskey there talking to Galen. She was also, I used to babysit her when she was a little girl. And
what's the TV show?
She was a student at CMU then.
The Coke Girl, Molly McCloskey, is credited on IMDb as Lovely Woman at WGON TV and went on to Knight Riders. She's best known for hosting Romper Room and Friends, the PBS children's show, in its final years.
We now return to Romper Room and Friends.
Hi, friends. Well, I had a good day today, and I'd really like to thank you, Rick, for coming to Romper Room.
You're welcome. I love being here.
I enjoyed learning all about the magic tricks, and we can try that, too. And do you know, I've got a little bit of magic of my own. I'm going to see my friends in the magic mirror. Romper Bomper, Stomper Boo, tell me do. Magic mirror, tell me today, did all my friends have fun at play? All my friends had fun today. I see Barley. She's having a special day today, and so is Annie, and so is Neil and Lenora and Janine and Vanessa. They're all having special days. And Bridget had a special day last Thursday, and Kim had one last Friday. And I'll see you again. Bye-bye, friends. Bing, bong, tick-tock.
Romper Room and Friends, featuring Molly McCluskey, is directed by John Wolfe. Portions of the preceding program were pre-recorded.
Miss Molly was on the series for 100 episodes, from 1981 through its final bow in 1987, and also played the puppet Granny Cat. Ironically, the program was shut down to make space for the Morton Downey Jr. Show, a bellicose shock television pioneer. McCloskey continued to work with children as a producer, lecturer, and consultant. At last report, she was a field development manager for Dove Chocolate Discoveries, a sort of Mary Kay for sweet tooths. Producer Richard P. Rubenstein spoke with Perry Martin for the 2004 Anchor Bay DVD release, dubbed the Ultimate Edition, about the origins of the project.
We're talking about 77. George wrote a script. George had written and directed Night of the Living Dead before he and I got together. And he had a concept of a trilogy, I think, originally. And one of the advantages of being a producing, directing team is we didn't have to go outside for material. George had written about 80 pages, and we had shown it to the agent that had introduced us originally, Irvin Shapiro. We gave him this 80 pages to read, and he passed it on to an Italian producer named Alfredo Cuomo. And Alfredo read the 80 pages, and he gave it to Dario and Claudio Argento to read. He was a beginning filmmaker. He had already a national reputation as a critic, and he was a student of film. So this was at the beginning of he had made a couple of movies which had sort of made him a superstar in Italy. Alfredo came back and said, wow, we really love this. Dario loves this. Where's the rest of the script? We responded, you can't see it until we make a deal. Part of that deal was that George would be their guest in Rome while he finished the script. I don't know how long he spent, maybe 2-3 weeks, something like that, 3 weeks a month. As far as I know, basically George sat down and wrote his script, I say with a certain atmosphere around him. That we then executed the business arrangement, which basically divided up the world in terms of distribution. Alfredo, Claudio, Dario represented, quote, the foreign group. Oversimplified, we kept the English language world, and they got everything else, with the exception of Latin America, which was also part of our territories rather than theirs.
Rubenstein got his start producing specials for television, mostly hour-long profiles on athletes called The Winners. He then produced Romero's pseudo-vampire film Martin, and in 1977, the pair co-founded the Laurel Group, a production company specializing in low-budget horror and science fiction fare. The company soon evolved into Laurel Entertainment Incorporated, whose productions included Creepshow 1 and 2, Knight Riders, Day of the Dead, and the network TV miniseries adapting Stephen King's The Stand, Golden Years, and The Langoliers.
The sunlit world of what he believes to be reality. But there is, unseen by most, an underworld. A place that is just as real, but not as brightly lit. A dark side.
Laurel also produced the well-loved syndicated horror anthology Tales from the Dark Side, running from 1983 to 1988, and its quasi-successor Monsters, which ran from 1988 to 1990. Between the two shows, famous faces making appearances included Steve Buscemi, Matt LeBlanc, Christian Slater, Danny Aiello, Adrienne Barbeau, Tony Shalhoub, Gina Gershon, Chris Noth, Pam Grier, David Spade, Linda Blair, Tori Spelling, Will Wheaton, Frank Gorshin, Troy Donahue, Ben Stiller's parents, and even rockers Debbie Harry, Meatloaf, and Laura Branigan. Darkside also got a movie in 1990, adding Julianne Moore to the roster.
Honey, it's family hour. There must be something on.
Oh, wow! Candy critters!
Oh, great. It's Monsters, our favorite show.
It's starting.
A complete series DVD set of Tales from the Dark Side was released in 2010, and one for Monsters was released in 2014. In 2015, a reboot pilot for Darkside was filmed but not picked up, and 3 scripts for the proposed show written by Joe Hill were adapted into comics by IDW in 2016.
The dark side is always there, waiting for us to enter, waiting to enter us. Until next time, try to enjoy the daylight.
Laurel was eventually bought out by Aaron Spelling and swallowed by various corporate mergers. Rubenstein went on to produce film adaptations of Stephen King's Pet Sematary, Thinner, and The Night Flyer, as well as a credit on the 2004 Dawn of the Dead remake and 2 of the Sci-Fi Network's Dune miniseries. Rubenstein has become a divisive figure in Dawn fandom, accused of withholding the film from continuous home video availability. This has sent the price of earlier releases into the hundreds of dollars, and disallowed Criterion giving the film its acclaimed treatment. On the other hand, the Dawn brand still has a cachet that the relentless, no-standard whoring of Day of the Dead lacks, yielding a single highly regarded remake, and Rubenstein committed considerable resources to a 3D upconversion of the original. It was recently announced that Second Sight will finally offer a bells and whistles 4K UK release of the Romero Rubenstein films, but no US plans have been announced. The good news is that Ultra HD Blu-ray players are region-free, so if the only option is an import, you'll still be able to watch it. No such luck for standard Blu-ray, though.
In 1968, George Romero brought us Night of the Living Dead. It became the classic horror film of its time.
Not that room! Not that room!
Now, George Romero brings us the most intensely shocking motion picture experience for all times.
It gets up and kills. The people it kills get up and kill. This situation must be controlled before it's too late. They are multiplying too rapidly.
Dawn of the Dead.
Meet me on the roof at 9 o'clock. Getting out.
I don't believe
We're
it.
gonna
What?
get out in the chopper. We've got to survive. Somebody's got to survive.
They kill for one reason. They kill for food. They eat their victims.
Imagine, if you will, that something has gone terribly wrong.
Shoot it, man.
Now, accept the fact that there's no escaping the horrible consequences. George Romero brings back the dead. Night of the Living Dead has ended. Dawn of the Dead is here.
We must not be lulled by the concept that these are our family members or our friends. They are not. They will not respond to such emotions.
Operator dead. Post abandoned. We may never get out of the room. It's everywhere. What the hell is it?
Looks like a shopping center, one of those big indoor malls.
What are they doing? Why do they come here?
Some kind of instinct, memory, what they used to do. This was an important place in their lives.
What is it?
We've got a war.
We have spawned our own savagery. Soon it will consume us all. It is a horrible, hauntingly accurate vision of the mindless excesses of a society gone mad.
They must be destroyed on sight.
When there is no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth.
We are down to the line, folks. We are down to the line.
Dawn of the Dead.
The first words on the screen are Herbert R. Steinman and Billy Baxter present a Laurel Group production. On the Facebook profile for the breezy, catty, highly rated UK TV documentary, Billy Baxter presents Diary of the Cannes Film Festival with Rex Reed. You can find a photo of both men flanking George Romero while the director wears a Dawn t-shirt. Steinman has a handful of production credits on his IMDb page, including 1964's Holocaust drama The Pawnbroker starring Rod Steiger, the 1965 adaptation of Helen Eustace's novel The Fool Killer featuring a post-psycho Anthony Perkins, 1973's Italian import Love and Anarchy, 1977's gay cinema milestone Outrageous, and 1980's The Unseen, a horror movie and an example of nominative determinism. Per Roger Ebert, Steinman was a kindly older man who had made his money in aspirin, and whose wife Anna was Jack Nicholson's psychoanalyst. Legendary film publicist Billy Silver Dollar Baxter, so named for his preferred tipping currency, was a well-known friend to film critics and a fixture at the Cannes Film Festival. Roger Ebert wrote often of this larger-than-life figure, and even devoted a chapter of his autobiography to Baxter. Here's an excerpt from a conversation with Billy Silver Dollar Baxter, thanks to Matthew Glasson, and available for your viewing in full on Vimeo.
Every time I went through customs, they'd see this big pile of silver dollars. They couldn't figure out what it was. So one year, I put them in a little suitcase and everything. Some son of a bitch robbed it on me. It was a real pain because people always loved them when they saw me, and it was only a silver dollar. I mean, you usually pay $20 for a tip to get in a place. Here I am getting away with a silver dollar. Had a lot of fun there, boy. They had a screening for Outrageous. I didn't like the movie, but I'm overhearing the critics talking to each other. Boy, what a great film. I said, there's got to be something to this. So I wound up, we got the film pretty cheap. And of course it was a big hit. It was an important film at the time, went over big in New York, that's for sure. They had a little casino in the back of the hotel. So I'm with Mario Puzo. Mario wrote The Godfather. He's playing roulette, I'm playing blackjack. And I'm sitting next to a guy, his name was Richard Rubenstein. The dealer deals out the cards, and the fellow says to me, he said, boy, I'd love to double down, but I don't have any money. So I said, let me see your cards. He had 11, the dealer had a 6, which was a natural that beat the house. I gave it only 1, paid me back, and then ran into him in the lobby of the hotel. He says, I have a movie that we can't finish because we don't have enough money. So I said, well, when we get back to New York, you'll show it to us. I had no idea what we were going to see. So we go over and see it. Movie starts. It's about zombies. Dawn of the Dead by George Romero. Now Herbert, a beautiful man that he was, we're walking down the aisle and he says to me, Billy, it's a piece of crap, but it's going to make a fortune. I says, you kidding? He says, no. He said, let's get together with this guy. So Herbert and I each put in $104,000. And then, of course, who figures? The thing is a tremendous hit. I'm still getting checks after 30-some years. It was a fluke. And I hate to tell you this, but I have yet to see the whole movie all the way through because I closed my eyes on most of the movie. because zombies are not my thing. I'll probably wind up one. George Romero was one of the nicest guys. He was like a big teddy bear. He was a beautiful guy and a very talented director. In fact, Rogers said it's the greatest movie of that genre that he's ever seen. I'm retired now. I'm living off my laurels. And the zombies, I didn't do it for the money, even though we did pretty good with it.
Next comes an association with Claudio Argento and Alfredo Cuomo. Claudio is the younger brother of Dario Argento and has served as producer on most of his films, as well as Alejandro Jodorowsky's Santa Sangre. Alfredo Cuomo also worked on 1969's Tepepa and 1997's The Night Flyer. Carl Augenstein did the lighting and would also work on Night Riders and 1980's Effects, about a horror movie filming real murders, featuring Tom Savini and Day of the Dead's Joe Pilato. Augenstein is the most common of surnames, so I think it's safe to assume some relation to Liz Augenstein, who will soon be seen portraying a WGON TV employee. We also get a sound credit for Tony Buba and assistant cameraman Tom Dubinsky, both of whom will figure more heavily in later episodes of this show. Instead of addressing them now, though, I'd like to take a few minutes to explain the how and why of ZombiCast, duration of Dawn of the Dead's existence. Movies by Minutes are a type of niche podcasting wherein people dissect 1 minute of a film per episode, with each episode spanning a number of minutes and usually released on a 5 to 7 episode per week basis until the entire picture is canvassed. According to an article by Ben Lindbergh for The Ringer, the format was pioneered by Pete Bonavita and Alex Robinson in 2013 with Star Wars Minute, released as a way to emulate the episodic nature of a Star Trek podcast called Mission Log, without the benefit of hundreds of individual Star Wars television episodes as a structuring guide. To be honest, I've barely ever listened to any Movies by Minute podcasts. The format just isn't my cup of tea. I don't feel like there's many examples of popular culture that can survive that level of scrutiny. One show I did sample was covering a popular franchise, but it already exhausted the best regarded material, and we're now dissecting less popular editions at the excruciating rate the podcast format demanded. I personally am fond of the series entry that they were infinitely criticizing, so I don't understand why the hosts would torture themselves sifting through the detritus of a work they clearly detested, nor why I should suffer their tediously needling a piece that I happen to enjoy. As a thought experiment, I wondered if there was any movie that I would be capable of addressing 1 minute at a time, and the obvious answer was my all-time favorite, George A. Romero's 1979 horror classic, Dawn of the Dead. In 2016, a local Houston convention called Comicpalooza gathered most of the cast of another favorite of mine, Aliens, for its 30th anniversary. Since I am very much not an autograph hound, but I am a comic book fan who collects original art, I decided to commission pieces of each of the actors in character. If I was going to use signatures as an excuse to chat with people associated with a favorite film, I would at least offer them a unique item with inherent value, if only as a conversation piece. In 2017, I learned of the existence of Living Dead Weekend, an annual Pittsburgh convention that gathers huge swaths of the cast and crew of Dawn. I decided to give Dawn the same treatment as I had Aliens, which has been a massive undertaking, given that there were about a dozen Aliens attendees versus many dozens of Dawn ones. Also, since Dawn of the Dead does not have the sort of expansive lore of the Alien franchise, I needed to put in the work to better get to know these performers and the characters they portrayed. I've tried unsuccessfully to attend Living Dead Weekend, in part because gathering the commissions has taken years and many dollars without yet completing the task. Even if the convention hadn't opted for a Creepshow theme this year, and if more than one of the 4 Dawn leads had shown up, I still simply am not yet comfortably prepared to attend. Also, frankly, I'm still annoyed that the con celebrated the 40th anniversary of Dawn in the summer of 2018, prematurely acknowledging the late 1978 Italian release of Dario Argento's inferior cut of the movie. George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead did not go into wide release in the United States until May 24th, 1979, meaning this podcast is only a month late for its true 40th birthday. As I said, I don't actually listen to Movies by Minutes, so I don't know or care about any common rules applied to the format. I won't be releasing weekly episodes, much less daily. There are no co-hosts, and I don't have any guests lined up. What I will be doing is simultaneously comparing all 3 major cuts of Dawn of the Dead. For the uninitiated, there were a great many cuts of Dawn, varying across international regions due to censorship. Dario Argento had a cut done for the European market that is the shortest, focusing on the action and horror at the expense of the social satire, comedy, and character development. Romero's theatrical cut is the most familiar to the English-speaking world, the most critically appreciated, and Romero's preferred version. This show will use his earlier, longer Cannes Film Festival cut as a way to incorporate all those editions in a time-based numbering scheme. However, there's also a fan edit dubbed the Extended Mall Hours cut that mashes together every bit of material available to the public, even though it doesn't take into account variances in score and the like. Since part of my goal is to compare the different officially sanctioned versions, I will not be addressing any fan edits. My intent is to use the podcast format as a way to narrow my focus on elements of the movie so I can better familiarize myself with it when I do eventually get to meet the people who made the picture. I hope that ZombiCast is unlike any other Movies by Minutes podcast, but I wouldn't really know, would I? For instance, I like complete units of entertainment. Since Dawn of the Dead contributed to zombies being one of my favorite subjects, and since I've therefore seen an awful lot of zombie movies, and they truly are often an awful lot, I'll do a bonus review per episode. If they do something like that on another show, I don't listen to it, so I didn't know.
Welcome to a night of total terror. Night of the living dead. The dead who live on living flesh. The dead whose haunted souls hunt the living. The living whose bodies are the only food for these ungodly creatures. Night of the living dead. A bizarre adventure in fear. An experience in shock, more shattering than your strangest nightmare. Night of the living dead. A night with the dead who cannot die. A night of total terror. Night of the living dead.
The obvious subject for this debut episode would be Night of the Living Dead, which I like and respect. Filmed for just over $100,000 amongst friends and associates of Romero's in local Pittsburgh media production circles, Night started off quietly in 1968 as a shambling creature feature passing through drive-ins. It slowly picked up revenue, reputation, and a smattering of critical acclaim to offset its sometimes scandalous reception for its graphic violence and political themes. Besides reinventing the traditional mindless Haitian undead slave zombie as a flesh-eating ghoul, Night is infamous both for its earning 250 times its production budget and for the distribution company allowing the copyright notice to fall off prints after a name change on the title card, sending the film directly into the public domain. In spite of its virtues, there's no way the film would have become so ubiquitous in baby boomer culture if it couldn't be shown anywhere and any time by anyone for free. Remember, It's a Wonderful Life was a theatrical flop before it became the Christmas movie on the back of marathon seasonal viewings at no cost, and Night received a similar buoyancy. Romero would spend the rest of his life trying to recover from the lost income from the Night copyright, while also reaping the benefits of the sustained visibility of the property. I first tried to watch Night on the tiny black and white set in my grandmother's bedroom around 1988, but it only half held my interest, and I doubt I finished it. I really only came back to it because of my love for Dawn and a greater appreciation for its complexities as I got older. I've now seen it enough times that I needed some novelty to motivate me to revisit. So I checked out the trailer for the Riff Tracks take and skimmed Elvira's movie Macabre before finally settling on the colorized version. I'm not sure if it was the 1986 Hal Roach Studios version or the 2004 Legend Films one. It looked crisp and clean, but also like a 1950s hand-painted postcard with way too many pastels to be taken entirely seriously. This is a movie that was made for black and white, or more appropriately, dim grays and deep shadows. The effect alters the viewer's depth perception and ability to decipher details, so that the undead are less conspicuous and more like inhuman shapes. Dawn proved that Romero could create horror with full bold color and bright lighting, but the sequel was designed for those attributes. Night looks a bit silly and cheap in color, though I did like seeing Barbara's blonde hair and healthy complexion contrasted against the green-gray flesh of the undead. Night of the Living Dead is an effective low-budget horror movie that anticipates the fake true-story realism of Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the found footage subgenre. I wonder if Knight influenced Howard Chaykin or Frank Miller's use of talking head TV broadcasts as a means of ongoing exposition in a narrative. Dwayne Jones's performance has been as fantastic. He's naturalistic, but is still able to dramatically monologue a quietly emotive word picture of scenes beyond the budgetary constraints of Knight so vividly that you may forget that we never see the scene he conjures. Problem being, he blows everyone else off the screen. In an unintentional moment of racial justice through meritocracy, Jones was given the lead role because he was the best actor available to the production. Despite being written without race in mind, Ben has so much more clarity and drive and courage than any of the other characters. Subtext for a movie released in 1968 is unavoidable. Likewise, his manhandling of an attractive young woman and butting heads with a rigid, cowardly middle-aged white man still makes the feature feel daring today. That said, the women in this movie are uniformly embarrassments to their gender. Barbara is alternately hysterical and a near catatonic basket case on the page, but Judith O'Dea's portrayal makes the character even more broad, and I'd have never believed a person talked like that until I heard her natural voice in documentary footage. Judith O'Dea is given nearly nothing to do besides making Keith Wayne seem slightly less wooden than the boards covering all the windows by comparison. The bitter couple played by Carl Hardman and Marilyn Eastman acquit themselves the best, but they're still acting for the stage while Jones is a cinematic star. It's not hard to see how shockingly transgressive Knight was in its time, but it's rather plodding and a bit quaint, half a century and a dozen seasons of Walking Dead on. Dawn is clearly a sequel, but also something of a redo, and I feel it improves so massively on Knight that it's almost rendered a prototype by comparison. Again, it's a good and historically important film, but I honestly enjoy hearing about its impact at least as much as watching the flick itself. That said, the still photography over the closing credits make it one of the most unnerving end sequences of all time. There are some great themes here, and it maintains tension and tone far better than Dawn does. I absolutely respect and see merit in the opinions of those who state that Night of the Living Dead is the greatest zombie movie and one of the all-time great horror movies. It's the granddaddy of them all, but I'm not running a Movie Minute podcast for it now, am I? Please send questions, comments, and especially clues to the identities of the actors I couldn't identify to rolledspinepodcasts via our devoted blog, Twitter account, Facebook, or email. This is a non-profit podcast, and I try to credit all the sources I use here, so please don't sue me into an early grave. The show does not have a definite schedule, and I had intended to quietly produce several episodes before releasing any. Truth is, once I started researching the project, I couldn't tear myself away long enough to work on one of our other podcasts, which bodes well for my getting to Minute Dose sooner rather than later. In the meantime, remember, there is a martial law state in effect in Philadelphia, as in all other major cities in the country. Deal with this properly. Without emotion. Without emotion.
Get that fucking idiot off the air!